All right, what's up, Grummies? Welcome to AROYA Office Hours, your source for free cannabis cultivation education. I'm your moderator, Keisha, and this is episode 90. Can you believe it? If you're on Hangout or checking us out on YouTube or Instagram, drop your question in the chat, and if it gets picked, we will cover it during the show. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm
Holding
doing
it down
well.
in studio solo.
Yep. What I do.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, it's wonderful. Very excited to announce that we have a special guest in the house today on the show. Would like to welcome Tim Crowell from Faven Lighting. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank
So
you.
good to
Glad to be
have
here.
you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, totally. Well, I know all about you because I am in Northern California, not too far from where you're situated. But let's give the folks out there a little bio. Tell us about your background.
Yeah. So I think I'm most known for being a cultivator around the Sacramento area. I've been in cannabis for 14, 15 years now, growing at scale for about 10 of those years. Previously worked at Alien Labs and Connected for a bit, and then broke off on my own, doing my consulting thing. And now the company that takes almost all of my time is Faven under Canopy Lighting, and really providing a good commercial solution for under Canopy for the space. So that is what I do all day now. I see a lot less plants, but
Do you miss interacting with those plants though?
Yeah, I do. I still find a little bit of time, but it's not as much as I like to. But
well, I would love to know a little bit more about your journey. Like, how did you go from 14 years ago in cannabis to now you've got an under canopy lighting business?
Yeah, it kind of all started at an Atmosphere concert in Berkeley, as stoner as that sounds. But yeah, basically just kind of got into paying bills through cannabis, and really met a couple really influential people early on, and learned how to grow on the Mendocino coast there in Fort Bragg, and from there just fell in love with growing and kept going, got outdoor capabilities, became primarily light dep, mixed light, and just full term grower. And then legalization in California hit in about 2016, 2017. And the market got a little weird. And I think somebody offered me like 1,300 for some dep pounds or something. And I was like, that's too low. And I was like, I'm done, which is such a great number now. It's funny to think back to. But I actually stopped and went back to school. So I went to UC Davis for a couple years, got a bachelor's of science from them, and then got out of there and got a job with Alien and Connected like a month later. And yeah, haven't left Sac.
Oh my God, amazing. Yeah, and tell the folks a little bit about the Sacramento cannabis scene. Yeah.
There's really nothing like it. And I'm saying that, and I haven't traveled the world to see all the scenes, but at least from a grower standpoint, I just think there's no place like it. There's so many well-established, like universal brands within a couple square miles of each other. And, we're competitive with each other, but it's still all about the plant, and it's still all about the community. And I just think it's very unique. We're all competing in the same space, but if I see somebody at the hydro store, because we all go to the same hydro store, if I see him at the hydro store, we'll end up, killing 20, 30 minutes just talking, so it's just very unique. And there's some of the best cannabis in the world is coming from Sacramento. And I am partial, yes, but that is the truth. So I just feel very lucky to have originally been from this region.
You're not exaggerating. Sacramento cannabis is exceptional. I mean, there it is.
By and large.
All right. So you focus on under canopy lighting with Faven. Jason, let's talk about lighting. Let's give like a little overview about how lighting factors into crop steering. And I would love to just kind of get this piece of how under canopy lighting fits within that data-driven cultivation. So go for it.
Sure. Let's start with the basics. Obviously, photosynthesis is catalyzed by light. So we've got CO2 and water that's catalyzed by light. So it is the driving energy factor in producing biomass. It's what's helping the plant build all of the blocks for material. Basically, you're sequestering carbon and turning it into cannabis. So when we think about, all right, what have we seen in the processes of light development? And obviously in the very early days was like mercury vapors and the weird stuff before commercial stuff really came available. And there wasn't much greenhouse production, early on in the days. And obviously through the 1900s, we started to see the implementation of HIDs and high pressure sodiums for many decades have kind of been the standard for any greenhouse or indoor cultivation. Obviously, as LED technologies have dropped in price and material manufacturing has allowed for white LEDs to be a cost-effective option, the emergence of those have had some pretty significant impacts on how we can modulate light in order to also modulate how the plant is responding. And so when we think about, all right, well, how does it all work, right? In most instances, say before supplemental, we were getting full spectrum sunlight, always coming from above. And the thing that's great about full spectrum is it's extremely powerful when we're getting it from the sun. The sun has an array of angles as it works throughout the day. And so those photons are hitting the leaf surface, and the chlorophyll is responding to that. So basically, when we think about, all right, how does it work inside of a supplemented indoor facility? And obviously our constraints are, so how many lights can we put, and how much money can we use electricity wise to produce this product? And there's obviously usually not a lot of variance in how that light is penetrating the canopy, right? So, and this is kind of what comes into play with when we talk about defoliating and canopy management practices is, all right, well, depending on how bushy my plants are, what my plant spacing is, what my light layout is, how much of that light do I have to basically modify the plant so that it can make the best use of it throughout the canopy of the plant. And then obviously, I don't know, Tim probably saw it a little bit longer ago, but I think under canopy lighting, I probably saw first maybe 5 years ago at some facilities we were testing that stuff out. And the idea there is, well, if we're having to manage our canopy more because we're not getting enough light to the lower parts of the plant, well, let's just supplement that from different angles. It just happens that under canopy is an easier installation than probably, side canopy lighting would be. And with the implementation of LEDs, there's a kind of a convenience factor, whereas I don't think you could really use HPSs under canopy in a very effective way. Obviously, you've got a lot of heat, typically quite a bit larger fixtures. And so, with LED bars, which is pretty much most of the under canopy lighting that I see, you get some flexibility in that. And so we have manufacturers like Faven that are optimizing those fixtures to be used in benches so that they can be cleaned easy, so that they're not outputting too much heat to affect your canopy temperatures, all that type of stuff. And I'll turn over here to Tim, and maybe he can tell us a little bit about what Faven's doing to optimize that usage.
Yeah, and that was perfect. It's, LED technology has come such a long way in just the last 5 years that it really has allowed Faven to become a company. And yeah, exactly. We are completely geared for putting a light underneath the plant. We didn't just take a light, turn it upside down, and put it underneath the plant. There's a whole shape. There's certain types of diodes. There's diffusion. There's how to disperse the heat, as you touched on. There's so many factors that goes into this. And luckily enough, you probably saw under canopy earlier than I. We used to mess around with the drop LED lights. They were the first ones to come out. You drop them inside the canopy, and they were 45 watts. They didn't do anything. We had better luck hanging HPS bulbs vertically in between our rows. That was the move. But then you would catch a nasty burn on the back of your neck if you bumped it on accident. That was not ideal. But I mean, that's the lengths that we used to go to get more light into the lower canopy. And luckily, we've just been able to, luckily I saw very early on in the under canopy phase, was able to test, inter canopy, under canopy, different placement, different planting densities, different lighting densities, how intense can you go underneath the canopy? What is too much under there, right? Because there is a limit. So it's just really interesting to be in the space now, and to see it kind of catching on is very cool, because it was a little lonely for the past couple of years, and Faven is very, very new, but there's been a lot of R&D and a lot of very, very sideways looks when I tell people about it. So now that it's kind of like catching steam, it's very rewarding, and having a lot better conversations now. Less people calling me crazy and I don't know science and stuff like that. So that's fun. But yeah, good lead in, Jason. Thank you.
I was wondering, what kind of results are you seeing with under canopy lighting? Like, what are the differences you've noticed through your tests?
So, everybody wants to talk yield, and I think that is, unfortunately, it is the most important thing in the cannabis space right now, because that is how you stay alive. And you have to be hitting a certain grams per square foot to even compete in this space. So everybody wants to hear yield. So I understand. And to be honest, we're seeing on average anywhere from 25 to 35% on just about every single first time user. We have people hitting higher than that. I don't really feel comfortable discussing higher than that, just because I don't want to give, false hope. But if the situation is right, your planting density is right, you're feeding right, you're irrigating right, there are some very, very high grams per square foot coming out. And, I think we are in a place in the market where you can't give up quality for yield, right? You need to have both in unison. And Faven delivers that. And that is through a lot of testing, because we're not trying to add more light to the top of the plant where it's already getting substantial amount of light. We are really looking at a holistic approach to lighting the entirety of the plant. And there are so many little intricacies that goes on to having just having a little more heat under the canopy. Well, that means the VPD between the top of your plant and the bottom and the middle of your plant are actually more even. So the plant is actually metabolizing a lot more efficiently. That's kind of like a side effect we saw. It wasn't really our main goal, but that little bit of heat actually does help, because we measure the VPD at the top, but what's your unders looking like? Like, it's very wet and it's very cool down there. Adding a little bit of light it creates more sources of energy for the plant than sinks of energy, right? And so that's a whole, like I said, a secondary thing that we saw. But to answer your question, really 25 to 35% is like everybody seeing that. Just about everybody seeing it. It's been pretty incredible. And that's all the R&D we did, first off. That's why the company that I was working for, they rolled it out so quickly, because we got these numbers back and it was substantial.
So I'm going to jump in here with a question that I've always been curious about, and kind of the way that earlier on, before I had a lot of experience with under canopy, was how I explained it to my clients as well. As so for that yield increase, what's the amount of power increase? How much more light are we actually adding to the room? Is it a 1-to-1 ratio where we're just saying, hey, we're adding more light to the room, so we're getting more yield out of it? Or is it something like, hey, we're adding more light in the correct places, and so we're getting a more than 1-to-1 ratio of yield out of that light increase?
Dude, I completely agree, right? A watt is a watt. And, the relationship between how much light is in your room is going to be directly correlated to how much yield's in your room, if you're irrigating and everything else is in unison. So if you think about a 4x4 square, say we've got one, let's just call it 1,000 watt, just to keep it even, just keep a nice round number. Well, you're adding two 120 watt Faven bars. So that's 240 watts. Okay. So there's your 25% right there, right? 240 watts is about exactly 25% of 1,000 watts. So that's I'm not saying it's a guaranteed locked in 25%, but like, you're adding 25% more light, you're probably going to get that yield. Where the 1-to-1 changes, and great question, is how are people getting 30, 35 and higher? Well, it's where the light is and how the plants are structured and how that particular cultivar puts on buds. You've got some that throw really nice, like golf ball size nugs all the way through, like to think of like a high yielder that's very popular right now, like Gush Mints. Like Gush Mints with under canopy is just straight cheating. Like, it's absolutely cheating, because the plant is just full top to bottom. I mean, it absolutely full with just golf balls, and all these nugs are usable and they're high quality and they're finished and they're, they're very mature. Like it's all the colors there, like just everything about it is A+ quality. And so that's really where you're gaining that extra above that 25%. So yeah, great question. It's really just where it's applied, how you are shaping your plants, by like, we're not really underclearing too much anymore. I'd rather drop plant count than underclear. Right. So you're making so each and every plant is completely utilized. And that's been a complete game changer there. Yeah, great question. Because you got to know what you're putting in to get out, right?
Yeah, right. No, totally. And also, I mean, I just appreciate too, like you're really talking about maintaining the quality at the same time that we're adding the supplement. And so it's still a very active process, right? It's not just put the lights there and then you get to go chill. Still got some work to do.
You can't add anything to your room and not watch a couple other things down the line change, right? So it's hard because I tell people to drop plant count and like that'll freeze a grower up real fast, especially a facility owner. They'll be like, I'm not dropping plant count. I'm like, just try it on half your table and try the other half your old plant count, and if you're already lower in plant count, you're probably okay. Like 9 per 4x4 is like a really nice sweet spot. A couple of people do 8 and get really good results, but it really just comes down to your space, how big your plants are. And I mean, Jason, there's 1,000 variables there. So it's hard to SOP it is what I'm trying to say. Like I have a loose SOP that I kind of give to people. And I'm like, you're going to need to find how it works within your facility, but this is a good place to start,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I personally, I think it's worth it just for the side effects of when we talk about product consistency, reduced in processing complexities. If I've got a higher amount of A buds, I'm putting less time and money into processing it and, doing side effects and obviously getting a little bit more of a premium out of it. So, between that and, and canopy management, some of those labor things are kind of a freebie on the side effect of increased yield.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
No, I was just going to say, you said, what was the word? Something complexities. Like, what did you just use? That was perfect term to describe what we're noticing. And product inconsistency is a big issue right now. We have, there's a big demand for purple, right? What's purple? What's half purple? What's green? A, B's, and C's, all, the green ones and the purple ones. You're looking at 5 to 6 different baskets now. Well, with under canopy, you're really looking at a consistent density, size, color. And so there's no need to sort anymore. Like most of the facilities that have fully switched over are saving so much on the time it takes to trim because there's less sorting from each trimmer, right? They're seeing way less bee buds, right? So everything's going premium. And then another one that's really hard to factor for each and every brand is, there's a ratio that brands kind of live and die by. And that's your bulk pound to eighth ratio, right? How many eighths in that bulk pound made it into jars? And I know brands that are in the 50, 60%, which is very low. And I know brands that are closer to the 90, 95%, but you're talking about getting that extra premium for that bud if it can go in a jar, right? And so every brand is different, but with under canopy, everything is so uniform and so usable and so mature and so high quality and just dank, to be honest with you. Everything's so dank that it makes it into a jar. And then that bulk unit went from, call it $1,000 on the bulk market, and now it just got jarred and is fetching, double that price on the consumer market. Those are the things that I can't quantify, but I can bring to the table, when I talk to, potential clients and whatnot. So good point. That consistency and the complexity. I'm gonna probably steal that from you, Jason. I really appreciate it.
Hey, it's on the internet, man. It's yours now.
There you go.
I love this conversation. All right, y'all. Well, we got 2 lighting experts on the show, but also both of them know a lot about cultivation. So I feel like we're going to go ahead and get started on some viewer questions. Would love to hear any specific questions related to lighting, if anybody has stuff related to that, so we can really leverage Tim's expertise today, but also Tim, feel free to chime in on any of these questions that come through. I'm going to start with this first one we got in from Instagram from Rocket Bud Farms.
I got a few more questions for Tim before we get moving on, if you don't mind.
Please go for it.
Yeah. Hey, so
let's go, Jason.
So Tim, I've seen quite a few implementations of under canopy in flower rooms. Do you have people using it in bedrooms, mom rooms, any other places? Or are you strictly doing it in the flower rooms these days?
Interesting enough, a couple months ago, I had a buddy reach out to me, and they're very, very tight on power constraints. New facility turning on, very tight on power, having to flip flop rooms, right? 12 hours on, 12 hours off, and what they figured out is they had enough juice left to apply under canopies and turn them on and use them to keep one of the flower rooms in veg for as long as they needed, just with that supplemental under canopy lighting. So they didn't have enough to run 18 hours a day with their top lights, but they had enough to run 12 hours a day with their top lights and have the under canopies turn on for another 6 hours. So keeping them out of flower, which really helped them. And I've seen it done in mom rooms. It was interesting. It was really hard for the workflow, but it made a ton of sense because you were now, a mom is good. If you can get a clone how many clones per square foot is like a very, if you're running a mom room, you need to be looking at clones per square foot and like how many moms you need and what your bench spacing is. And so now you're kind of looking, instead of like a square, we're looking at cubic, right? We're looking like how much cubic feet of mom space do we have because it's got underlighting. So I don't know if it is, I haven't done the analysis enough to know if it's worth it to like have a smaller amount of moms that have under canopy lighting, but it's definitely something that the market is going to test out before I get around to it, to be honest. That's what most of our data is coming back from, like, the people we have partnered in here in Northern California, but the feedback, we have, lights in hundreds of growers' hands now. And it's, the feedback is just daily, and it's pretty incredible. So, but yeah, to your point, like I've seen people use it to keep plants out of flower when they're tough on, electricity. And then I have seen the mom usage. I just didn't know if it, penciled out, I guess you could say.
Gotcha.
Good question.
Got another question here. Let's chat about spectrum a little bit. And some of my favorite growers I've seen implement under canopy with their HPSs up above. Maybe they've been cultivating for quite a while. And let's just think about, is this somewhere where maybe during the end of ripening, I want to turn your under canopy lights off just to help, make sure I am getting the farther red lighting from my HPSs, or what kind of options do we have there that you might recommend?
Dude, right on. Yeah. So the HPS spectrum that we have slated for those rooms is a little higher in blue. And that really comes from watching, being around long enough to remember when we checkerboarded metal halides and HPS in rooms. And those are some of my favorite rooms, and I don't know if it's nostalgia or what, but those are some of my favorite rooms and the dankest, cannabis I've had. And, everybody got away from those quietly because, we didn't have a forward facing community to talk about it, and everybody was chasing yield, just like always. HPS was putting off better yield. So when we got the ability to kind of look at spectrum balancing and how HPS is so heavy in the red, orange, and yellow, I kind of thought back to those days with the metal halides. And then also a lot of people are checkerboarding full spectrum LEDs and HPSs in rooms, and that cannabis is coming out exceptional. There's something to that balance. So when we put our spectrum in, we really tried to hit a lot of, it's still got a lot of far red in there, but it's balanced out with a lot of blues, yellows, greens, like a little bit of what the HPS light is missing. Now for dimmability, Favens are dimmable. Most products on the market are not. And that comes from, I like to start them early in flower and ramp up intensity. And then certain genetics, you can do it to every genetic, but certain genetic actually kind of needs you to turn down that intensity. Ones that are a little more sensitive to light, plants that are a little more finicky, So when we start ripening, I'll actually tell people, first time you can run 100% and try it, or you can start dimming things, take 10% off first day of ripening and then reduce 5% over the next few days until you're done and you're harvested. And you can really maintain quality of the buds closest to the lights that way. Now, obviously, light is yield. So you may not get, the 100 percentile of how like the best you're going to get out of that row, but there's something to be said about maintaining that quality and just really watching the ripening of your buds. So good question again. And I really like the ability to dim. We run a lot of finicky genetics, a lot of runts, a lot of skittles, a lot of not the easiest cultivars to run. So a lot of those seem to really like having the energy dimmed down on them just a little bit towards the end. And I only usually get to about 75, probably between 70 and 80% is my sweet spot when I'm finished, harvested, everything done.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. No, I love that you jumped right into the intensity modulation, because that was going to be my next question as well. So we don't even have to that. So it sounds like you got just one spectrum type across your product line. Is that right?
So we have one spec'd out for HPS and then one for your typical full spectrum LED that you see in just about every grow. So, and that one side's a lot more on the red side.
Okay.
Kind of just incorporating what I see as a lack of most top light LEDs in use today, just kind of a lack of red. And just being there, kind of luckily enough, I was able to do a lot of spectrum trials at the company I worked for before. And I just remember having an LED room and putting like a more blurple spectrum underneath, and those results were great. Whereas like the more white light just didn't have the same effect, and it didn't round out the product as it should. Like, and the spectrum balancing is more of a quality side, right? We didn't do it because it's better for yield. It's all going to be yield. You're adding light to your plants. You're going to have an increased yield, but we wanted to make sure growers had the ability to control their quality as well. And I think spectrum balancing is kind of the term we're using. You're just balancing out what your top is doing with your bottom, and so yeah, we have our full spectrum, farther red, I guess you could say, and having great results with it. Love them. Just put them on some double stacks and had a great time. Double tier. All right.
Nice. Yeah. So about the dimmability, do you guys sell like a dedicated controller for that for dimmability, or is it 0 to 10 volts? So I can use a standardized lighting controller for that.
It's 0 to 10. Trollmaster is a really easy one to integrate with. It just takes an LMA 14, the lighting adapter. Oddly enough, Vivo Sun controllers from Amazon work decently well. And anybody who's buying Faven to just run a trial, I always say go ahead and buy that one just because it's a little cheaper and you don't have to buy a full Trollmaster setup right off the bat. But yeah, that's your dimmability, that's your on off. It just has a RJ11 or RJ13 cord that runs to your controller, and you're set up from there.
Nice.
Very easy.
Since we do have the lighting specialist guy on here, what do you think about ramping in and out of intensity as far as when we're turning lights on, turning them off? Obviously, HPSs have a certain warm up time, and then they have some residual cool down time that they're still producing light. So they have a fairly natural curve on the edges of that photo period. LEDs, on the other hand, are usually almost full brightness almost immediately. Is that something that you've played with a little bit?
I have. I think if you're managing the crop appropriately, I haven't seen the need for it, but I think there are benefits that I maybe haven't spent the time to really pull that thread on. But I do think I am a little more cautious with LEDs than I am with HPS. And that just comes from, kind of getting my butt kicked early with LED transition from HPS. And somebody who came right into the industry and has been full LED, they're probably a little less hesitant than me. But yeah, that sunset and sunrise is something that I do like, but I haven't played with it enough. But as for like the under canopy towards it, they pop on, full intensity, ripping from, basically 1201, they're or as soon as they turn on, they're about 100. So
Yeah, no, absolutely.
yeah.
Let's say I just bought some of your lights or someone else's under canopy lights. What types of modifications do I need to be aware of as far as HVAC, as far as nutrient load, other factors that are kind of a heads up if I am transitioning into under canopy lighting in my room?
So water demand is going to be increased. I tell everybody expect about a 10 to 15% increase. And that just comes from volume, right? You're just looking at, you're going to send some more volume. You're probably going to sneak another P2 in there. You're probably going to need, you're going to have to watch your drybacks. They may be a little more intense. And that is easily mitigated. Just making sure, if you I tell everybody to start with one trial bench, because it's a lot more fun and a lot easier to watch one bench of under canopy than to try to dial in a whole room with it. But if you just have one bench and one irrigation zone, it's easy to mitigate the water needs, especially if you have a platform like AROYA. Like you can just see it. You can pull up the row with it and pull up the row without it. And I mean, you can see the sharp, downtrend of the water content line. Food is another one that we see an increased demand. But we really, and I tell everybody 10% on that just as like a blanket SOP, and you can go up or down from there. But really we see it more with HPS rooms that add under canopy lights, because they're adding the full spectrum. It's more of you're adding LEDs to an HPS room. When you're adding more LEDs to an LED room, you're probably feeding enough. Most people are, but I always tell people if they see kind of a deficiency, I would pop it up about 10%. If you're at 3.0, run 3.3. If you're higher than that, you're probably all right. But it depends on the conditions of your rooms, obviously. But those are the two main ones, I think. And then people ask for heat, HVAC capacity. A watt is a watt, and there's a direct translation from a watt to BTU, and it's easy math. You can just Google it. But, and this is, I may get, may not get the greatest feedback about this, but this is very not scientific, but where that heat is on the plant, this is very applied, I should say. This is very applied. Chew me out scientifically if you want to. But it's where that heat is, right? We're not adding it to the top of the room, right? We're adding it underneath the plant. And the plant it's so close to the gas exchange in the plant where I'm not saying it's 100% mitigated, but there's less of an increase that you're planning on. And I haven't been able to really like dial this in on, exactly what is happening in that process. But because it is in the lower canopy, the plant is just utilizing the heat. Like it needs that heat right there. And again, it's so close to the transpiration process that it's just kind of chewing up that extra little bit of heat, right? We already have very cool lights. Our lights run from about 85 to 93. Like they're not hot. We did that on purpose, right? That took us a long time to figure out how to mitigate that heat down there. But a little bit of heat actually helps, as we were talking earlier, right? It really evens out the VPD top to bottom of your plant. So your plant's just moving in a more uniform way. So yeah, that's another one. Dehum, right? If you're transpiring more, if you're having to water more, you're transpiring more. So dehum capacity, but that is usually mitigated with dropping plant count. Like a lot of people who are nervous about it, I'm like, hey, drop the plant count, instead of 4 plants wide, go 3 plants wide. And they've had 0 issues, right? So if you can drop that plant count to kind of mitigate that extra little bit, it's, it hasn't been too much. Nobody's called me and been like, I've completely blown up a room. It's not that, I have blown up a room before, but it wasn't Faven's. It was very early on in the R&D. we definitely got a little wild in there, but that's what R&D's for. Anyway, but yeah, great question. Cause you're going to see some changes. They're so minimal. And with the technology and the workflows we have set up in commercial cannabis, like they're so easy to maintain and they're so easy to be like, oh, okay, that's happening. Let me do this, and that's by design, because being a commercial cultivator for so long, I know that the two main things that, putting a product on market needs to do is, one, ROI. Cannabis is not what it used to be. Nobody's got free cash flow everywhere. ROI has got to be on point. Faven is a single run return on investment for more than 90% of the people we work with. And then two, it cannot interrupt commercial workflow. We know that workflow is king, is absolutely king in commercial. We can't be like, hey, here's 25% extra yield, but everything you do on the daily is now junk and you have to restart. Like, there's no way any product could come in and blow up a facility's workflow. So we knew we had to be easy. We knew we had to integrate. And that's, you know, like I said, that's all by design. So just been a long time quietly working.
Yeah. And, you know, the fact that you brought up the, you know, the physical constraints, workflow constraints, can you tell me a little bit about, you know, what it is, what's it like going through a cycle, implementing, under canopy lighting, specifically, you know, the Faven under canopy lighting. A lot of times I see this where the under canopy lights are sitting on some pots that are upside down, or other interesting implementations, just because it is a newer type of product in the market. But you know, what's it look like to get them set up, to clean them, you know, room turnover? How much extra time do you think's going on in there? Maybe you can walk us through that.
Yeah, definitely a lot less time than under clearing your plants. That's for sure. But you know, setup is fairly simple. I like to put the plants in the room first, and then we install lights. You can do the opposite. It's just, if you have 2 rows of Favens, getting that plant in between is kind of a pain. So we put the plants in the room, we set them up. Everybody's using PVC brackets or pots right now. We have legs, they are coming. We were kind of caught up with adjustability and trying to not pass on a ton of cost to the consumer, because it's already a lot to add to your room. And we didn't want to add like, hey, here's adjustable legs, we need another X amount of dollars. Like, we want it to fit in with our product so we can just have legs. So we have standard legs, standard sizes coming. They should be here any day, to be honest with you. And that's going to be the best way to implement, because they're V-shaped. They have great airflow, right? I want to make sure everybody's got their airflow down on those benches. The clip is unique to Faven, so you just pop the light in, very simple. And you basically clip them in end to end. There's no cords in between, right? We're IP66 rated. It's a very nice connection port. And you know, at 277, which most commercial growers are running, you can daisy chain 20 of them together, you know, so you can cover a lot of space with them. And so you get them set up, and, you know, we usually veg in our flower rooms for, I don't know, 2-3 days, nothing crazy. I just like acclimation. I think plants do better when they acclimate instead of like plant them and flip them. You know, if that's how your schedule allows for, I get it. But, you know, we like to leave them in there, and I leave the under canopies off until day 1 of flower. Day 1 though, we're turning them on 50%, 45 to 50% is like the lower setting that I like to really mess with. And I leave them there for a couple days, and then I slowly start ramping them 5%, 10% every other day, however you want to. It's best to just set a goal. You know, you want to be at 100% by day 21, day 17, whatever that may be. You know, set your goal there and, you know, increase your percentages accurately. And then once they're at 100%, usually that's after stretch is done. And we leave them on 100% and all the way, and just kind of go about bulking as bulking. And then the only real change at the end is when you start ripening. And that's when I start turning them down on certain genetics. Certain genetics really don't mind, and they kind of like it at the end. We just did a row of Blue Dream, because I know everybody's like, oh, you yielded on Blue Dream, good job. It's not that crazy. Like, everybody can, but the consumer market and the rec market in California, it's still a top 3 selling strain. So we were like, all right, let's put it on some Blue Dream and see what happens. And it was hilarious because we didn't dim down that row, and it's the dankest, stickiest, like the greatest Blue Dream you've had in a while, you know? So anyway, some strains want to be dimmed, some strains don't mind. Obviously, like no strain minds being dimmed, but some can really like keep at 100 until, you know, harvest. But yeah, that's your only change. You know, you're ramping up, you get to 100%, you're leaving it at 100%, or whatever percentage you decide to leave it at. It doesn't have to be 100. And then ramping down if you want to during ripening. So very, very easy. These are you're already making irrigation adjustments, you're making lighting adjustments, right? It all kind of is in that switch. So it just becomes a part of the SOP. It's very, very simple. And then cleanup. We harvest the plants. If you've ever held a Faven unit in your hand, then you know they're sturdy. Like these aren't like wispy little bars that'll break. So they can handle being harvested onto. A plant can hit them. They're going to be fine. You know, it's not brittle. So we harvest, we go through, we pull the lights out before the pots, and we clocked four workers to pull out of, it was 180 lights, Faven lights in a room. And it was all the way from unclipping to bringing them out of the room to wiping them down with just alcohol. Never do it with a dry rag. That's the only exception. You'll scratch the lens. Wipe it down and stack them and get ready for implementation for the next room. And it was less than 45 minutes with 4 people for 180 lights. You know, we're talking very minimal extra labor. And if you have more hands, that's just going to go even faster. But you have somebody unclipping them, somebody bringing them out, put it at the station, they wipe it down, they stack it. I mean, it's such an easy SOP. And we have good, you know, Faven Lighting, our Instagram has a good reel on that too. Yeah,
Tim, I got a question for you. Actually, somebody just submitted this on YouTube. It's perfect segue into what you're talking about. They were actually wondering, do I need to lollipop like I normally would? Talk a little bit about trimming up the plant and defoliation differences, if any.
Yeah, a lot of difference actually. And it's one of the reasons why I kind of harp on dropping plant count, because you're going to add lights down there. If you keep your plant count the same and you stop under clearing, you're going to get a little congested. And that congestion is okay because you're like, I want all this product. I want all this product, but you know, there's something to be said of like, if you're having to deleaf too much to get that vertical penetration of the light, then you're kind of defeating the purpose. So if you're basically, we're not under clearing as much. I like to do the shock. It's about this much, but like, this is your soil. This is the top of like how much I'm under clearing. And it all depends on plant sizing and all that jazz. But for the most part, you know, the top of, or the base of your light is sitting at the base or the rim of your pot. And so I under clear just a little bit, anything that's not getting hit directly by light. And it's really different for every grower, but we are really not under clearing. We are dropping plant count, making sure there's no extra congestion down there because you are leaving all those branches. So it saves you a ton of labor in lollipopping or skirting or under clearing, whatever the term is, saves you a ton of labor there. And then, you know, I've seen the opposite where, you know, they leave plant count the same, but they end up deleafing like crazy. And I do not like deleafing heavy. I know a lot of people do it, and a lot of good cultivators I know do it. It's just not my favorite thing to do. So instead of deleafing like crazy to get that upward mobility of the light, you're really like, you're better off dropping plant count than to just strip your plants of every leaf they have, in my opinion, just from what I've witnessed. But your overall goal with this is to create a perfect mix of light in the center of your plant, from your top light to your bottom light, like right in the middle. You want your intensity to be consistent from the top to the bottom of the plant. And if you can get that mix of light in the middle, you've done your job and you nailed it. It's easy to see on HPS, right? Because we've got this yellow glow and then we've got a more bluey glow from underneath. And it's kind of easy to see on LEDs because we're so red underneath, but if you can create that perfect mix in the center, the yield, the capacity to yield more is so much in the center of the plant and the bottom third of the plant that if you can just nail that matrix of light, it's it. So, sorry, that was long-winded, but yes, not a lot of underclearing.
So I got a great question here for you. One that I don't know the answer to. And that is when you talk about the perfect mix in the middle, how are we measuring that? You know, let's say I'm going in there with a pyranometer or any light measurement device. Do I flip that down on to see how the canopy light's coming up? Because when we think about leaf biology, obviously, you know, our chlorophyll, the chloroplasts are on top of the leaf. So most of that absorbed energy is actually, you know, being reflected back down. Right. So how you know, using measurement tools, would you go in there and know that, your light is at a good ratio top to bottom?
So I'm always watching my par at Canopy. Always top of the canopy, and I'm lower than most people, I'd say. LEDs and HPS, I tend to be a little lower than most people at the top. When it comes to measuring in the middle, I was joking with Jordan from Blueprint this morning, and I was like, the next product is a par meter that's got a thing on the top and a thing on the bottom, and I just stick it in the plant and it's perfect. So Apogee, please, Rugby, make me one, please. That would be awesome. But yeah, you're actually measuring, I like to go in there and find the middle of the plant, and it's difficult because there's always a stem or always a leaf kind of, in there kind of getting in your way of taking a reading. But I'm looking at what I'm getting in the center of the plant. I flip my meter upside down, like you were just saying, and then I flip my meter right side up to kind of see what is kind of penetrating through from the top and the bottom. And then we've been using a spectrometer and looking at which spectrum we're getting that reading from, right? It's easier in HPS rooms, right? And so that's been really interesting to see how much reflectivity and what is going on in that center of the plant. And it's really just a mix of both. Like we're really like, when we nail it and we're like, okay, this is the perfect plant height for this genetic, like it's really this perfect mix of both. And for, the question of like, how intense do you get? I mean, how intense do you want to feed? What can that plant handle? Like these lights at 100% can kick off some PAR, some PPF. Like you guys, it definitely, it kind of cranks in there. And so you kind of find the balance on different cultivars and different rooms and whatnot. Gosh, I had one more thing to add to yours, and it's escaping me right now. I'll remember in a little bit. But yeah, anyway, so that's kind of how we're measuring it.
I got another question for you, Tim. Somebody wanted to know if they're running 650 watt LED from Horticultural Lighting Group, which Faven lighting item would they purchase? Would they need to contact you?
Yeah, and so there's a couple companies that are putting out LEDs that have spectrum control, which are very awesome. I don't have any personal firsthand with that. I will say that I always side with our more red spectrum. I just think that cannabis growers as a whole, cannabis as a whole, everybody kind of sides more towards the deeper red. It's more efficient. There's a lot that goes into that. Both will work. I just side with red. Greenhouse application, red. Mixed light, top light, HPS and LED, I side with red again. Our HPS version is very much to try to give the HPS growers an advantage in just quality top to bottom and bring out a whole different terpene profile. But most genetics are just, most people who call me that have Favens in their rooms, they'll call me week 6 and be like, why is my room so terpy? And, we think it's a lot of the spectrum balancing that we're doing here. But for those few companies that have the really nice like spectrum tuning where you can almost mimic an HPS, I still would side with the red. I think the feedback that I've gotten from customers that I'm like, oh, I don't know, let me send you both, let me know, like, please. They've been like, yeah, just go with the red. And I'm like, okay, that's what makes sense scientifically to me. But yeah, anyway, so I would side with the more R8 spectrum.
Why is my room so terpy? I love that you actually get those phone calls.
It's so great. I get them weekly now. Like, it's like, I get like, dude, my yield is this. And I get, man, this is chronic. I get them so much now. And I follow up with like 500 questions because I want to know how they did it, how it worked, how they like it. But yeah, it's been really cool. It's been, like I said earlier, we have, hundreds of lights or thousands of lights out. We have hundreds of growers using them now, and everybody grows different still. Like everybody's got a different way of approaching and running different genetics. So it's been such a learning experience since we released Faven, 7-8 months ago. Gosh, I can't remember what I was going to say to you, Jason, and just on the tip of my tongue. I'm so bummed right now. I had a good one for you.
It'll pop up right after we're off air.
Exactly.
It will.
Yeah,
I'll get you on Tuesday.
Well, in these next 10 minutes, y'all want to get into, actually really 5 minutes or so, you want to get into some cultivation and crop sharing questions?
Yeah, let's do it. Sorry, I kind of took the show there. I wanted to make sure we were
those were all great questions.
Getting deep in the light.
Great.
I love it when Jason talks about lighting. It's fun. Yeah. Nerding out. I love it. All right, let's get into this one. We got this one from Rocket Bud Farms on Instagram. They wrote, my clone tips of the leaves are turning brown after a week from cutting. My PPFD is around 100, humidity 85 to 90%, soaked in 2.5 EC solution. Some of them rooting faster than others, cut from the same plant. Sounds like they need some advice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of just going to break down with some pretty typical cloning SOPs, and it's hard to say which one of these would be causing that in this situation. Obviously, cleanliness of tools is one that I think gets overlooked easily, especially if you're low on staff or running a pretty budget system in there. Just make sure that you've got a bleach solution there that you're changing out your cutting tools with. Another thing is make sure that you're going in and cleaning up those cuts. So make it in a nice 45 degree angle, hopefully at the node knob if you can. Make sure that you're using a pretty fresh cloning agent. And I would probably use one that's more popular on the markets. You can get that stuff pretty cheap in bulk supply and dilute it down if you want, or you can use a brand name from your nutrient manufacturer. Lots of great options for that. Making sure that your rock wool is prepped well. That's another situation there. And then the last one, actually, there's probably a whole bunch more in there, but I'm kind of just trying to hit the ones that I think might be affecting you. Just keep an eye on what your watering looks like as well. So, most of the time we're going to be letting that rock wool dry down a little bit before we do get that first irrigation in there. And one of my favorite ways to build SOPs on that is just using a kitchen scale. And documenting basically, hey, here's what my wet weight of this substrate is, and then keep an eye on it. And that way, next time you run it, or from tray to tray to tray, we can make sure that we're getting the same drybacks across those. And that should help a little bit with consistency on those clonings. As far as the brown tips, that doesn't sound like it's going to be due to light. 100 micromoles is usually a pretty good place for getting clones to rock and roll. And, those humidities are okay as long as you're getting a burp every once in a while. So, it's hard to say. To me, it sounds like, possible contamination somewhere or just inconsistency in application.
Yeah. And all great tips. I think cleanliness is really number one when it comes to cloning. And the other thing, and this is coming from a very recent experience where one of our facilities was having not good cloning rates, kind of out of nowhere too. And it came down to how long we were leaving our domes on for. And we kind of come to realize that if we've got plenty of humidity in our rooms, the domes really only need to stay on for like a day and a half. And it's actually detrimental. Burping them once a day really isn't enough. You need to burp, multiple times a day if you're going to leave the domes on. And that's where I kind of saw the leaf tip browning, where it wasn't the healthiest plant. And as soon as we actually started going domes for one day and then removing domes. And we're lucky enough to have a very consistent environment. So make sure, before you try that, your environment's on point. But just do a trial tray, try a couple of the things that Jason outlined, and just do domes off, no domes, day, dome for one day, dome for 3 days, just try a couple things. And the more you try in a shorter amount of time, the faster you're going to figure out your issue. And it's probably going to be something so basic that you're going to be mad at yourself, because that's always what it is. It's always something simple.
Yeah. And there's a ton of great resources out there. One that comes to mind for me is checking out Grodan has some great cloning resources on their site. There's their white papers for cloning applications. Athena, actually, just their growers SOP, a great big book. Covers a lot of aspects of there, and their cloning section is pretty solid as well. So maybe go check those out, and there's going to be a lot more detail in there that we might have missed out on.
Amazing. Thank you guys for sharing your insights on that. Rocket Bud Farms, good luck. All right, we're going to keep it moving. We also got this question on Instagram from Kushland. Kushland, they write, hi, AROYA family. I'm in day 4 of flowering in generative steering, and I cannot achieve my 40% dry pack. Sometimes I have to jump a day of irrigation to get it. My runoff pH is 6.1 and my runoff is EC is 3.3. Got any tips for Kushland?
What size substrate they say?
So we've got day 4 flowering. I cannot cheap. They're looking for 40% dryback. Runoff pH is 6.1. Runoff EC is 3.3. Nothing more than that. Those are the details that you shared.
So, you know, a 40% dryback would be a very significant one. You know, that's going to be a generative type of dryback, probably somewhere around, you know, week 2 weeks. I mean, like day 14, excuse me, in flower, once your plants have established pretty optimal, you know, plant growth. I mean, you're looking at a plant that's, you know, getting right maybe in the middle of stretching. That's when we see some of those drybacks to be maximized. I personally wouldn't get too concerned about, you know, making sure you're at a 40%. I've seen generative applications, you know, be it at 25% and still induce hormone balance in the plant that is more reproductive, you know, that more generative response from the plant. You know, that being said, you know, if you are in rock wool, I would be concerned about that, you know, that pH of the runoff being a little bit too high for what I prefer. And also, you know, if you're running a 40% dryback in rock wool, you're going to be just right on that limit of becoming hydrophobic, possibly past the limit of being hydrophobic, just depending on what you're seeing in your field capacities. And then if you are in something like cocoa, I wouldn't be too concerned. You know, if you really want to push super hard generative, you can do a skip day with your irrigation and let it do that 40% dryback. You just, you know, got to make sure that, hey, I'm not riding the line too close. That if there's an issue, that I don't have something detrimental. So, you know, another option would be if 40% is what you absolutely have to have, then drop a size in this substrate. You know, depending on what you're in now, you'll have a little bit more or possibly less controllability of how you're doing irrigations. You know, when we drop a size, if we are hitting that 40%, yeah, we got still, again, less buffer, less room for error. When we're going to irrigate, you know, if the next day, if those don't happen on time, then we could be running into some drought stressors. That being said, you know, when we have more steerability, so if we are in a smaller one, then, you know, every once in a while, we're going to have to stretch out our irrigations when we get later in the plant cycle. Sometimes we just have to implement P2s, even when we're only wanting to do P1s. So those are some options there.
Anything to add, Tim?
Yeah, just crop steering. I think people get hung up on percentages and what they need to achieve for the plant. But you really just watch what the plant is giving you. It's crop guiding. You're guiding the plant, trying to get it to do what it should be doing at certain times to get, you know, the end result. So if it's giving you right now, it's only giving you can give it a, you know, P1 every other day. That's where you're at. That's fine. You're very early. Let it establish. You know, I think you can over irrigate very easily. And oxygen is something that if you over irrigate, you're going to lack in your soil. Oxygen is a great driver of root health and root expansion. So keeping that balance and keeping it a little drier in there, you're just going to create more roots, and it's just going to start drying back farther and farther and farther. So you're fine where you're at. Don't do too much. Jason had some great tips. Just keep it simple.
I love the way that you said that. So like when I first heard the term crop steering, when I was cultivating, I was like, man, I got so many issues going on at this facility that these plants are driving me, not the other way around. So I was like, all right, this is cool. Rather than being in a reactive situation in order to implement plant health or just keep them alive, you know, I was thinking like, all right, well, crop steering is it's just a guide, like you says. It's just like, all right, how do I want this to work if everything is right? And so, you know, every once in a while, you just got to get out of the lane a little bit and, you know, pass the roadblock or make your own road. So
yeah, early on when I'm in 2 gallons, I don't irrigate, but every other day. If I'm in 1 gallons, I have to irrigate or they die. So like, it's all substrate sizing really.
Fantastic, you guys. Thank you for that. All right, I got one more question we're going to ask here. This was a great one. As a home grower, I don't care about yield. All I want is quality. Knowing that, would you recommend skipping vegetative steering during bulk and going generative all the way through flower?
Sure. You might shorten up your cycle a little bit and you should have pretty high quality. It's not a bad idea if you're not concerned about yield at all.
Yeah, and I agree. Like if you grow how you want to grow, like it just grow it how you want to grow it. I think you could probably throw one P2 on there and really be happy with your quality. A lot of times we'll throw a last ditch P2 on things because we're, undersized in our substrate, as we just kind of touched on, and we have to. But if you don't have to and you want to keep it generative and water once a day, I mean, that's just called old school growing. It all works. So I would do a run, go full generative, and then do a run where you add a little bit. Something that I'm kind of playing with is how many P2s to do, how early, and then kind of tapering those off. That's been cool. As the weeks, as you get closer to ripening, dropping P2s is helping. So, but if you're a home grower, man, you have a blank slate. You get to try anything you want. So
the sky really is the limit with the home growers. Awesome.
Yeah.
You guys, thank you so much for that. Tim Crowell from Faven Lighting, thank you so much for coming on the show. Before we go, can you tell people where to find you, how to follow you, how to connect with you?
Faven Lighting on Instagram, very simple, Faven Lighting. I go by Bobby Bags on Instagram as well. I have a decent community there. I don't post as much on that. You're going to get a ton of your resources from our Instagram. Favenlighting.com is the best way to, order from us. We have online checkout. If you're a commercial facility, we have a place for you to submit a lighting layout where it just gives us all the specs we need to make sure we can, build you out a lighting layout that meets the needs of your facility. Info@favenlighting.com is a great email to get in touch with me and our team. Just reach out if you have. Everybody probably has a ton of questions about Under Canopy. It's new. It's kind of a buzzword, and we've been doing it for almost 4 years now. So we have just about 90% of the answers for you. The rest of the 10% is up for the rest of the growers to figure out. and let me know, please. So yeah, Faven Lighting, Instagram, and that's where you find us.
Amazing. All right. And if y'all enjoyed this conversation, guess what? When Office Hours is in Sacramento next Tuesday, January 23rd, Tim's going to be on the panel with Seth and Jason. So we're going to keep this conversation going. All right. So just a reminder, we've collaborated with the Connect to bring crop steering cultivation conversation live and direct to Sacramento. And I'm going to drop the RSVP link. It's a free event. You definitely want to register and show up, because there's going to be, on top of great conversation, we're going to be raffling off some pretty special stuff. I heard a rumor, and AROYA Go may be raffled off. So we'll see. Stay tuned, y'all. All right.
Food too. Just heads up.
Free food. Dinner will be provided. You got to RSVP though.
And it's good.
Very important. Yeah. All right, y'all. Tim, thank you so much for coming on the show. So good to have you.
This is a great platform. Keep killing it. I appreciate you guys.
We appreciate you. Looking forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah,
see you on Tuesday. Thank you, Jason and Chris, our producer, for another great session. And thank you all for joining us for this week's AROYA Office Hours. To learn more about AROYA, book a demo at AROYA.io. Our team will walk you through the ins and outs of the ultimate cannabis cultivation platform. If you have any crop steering or cultivation questions you want us to cover, drop them anytime via the AROYA app. Email us at sales@aroya.io. Send us a DM via Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. We definitely want to hear from you. And if you're a fan of the pod, be sure to subscribe on our YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. Thanks so much. See you in Sacramento, hopefully next week, and certainly at the next session. Thanks, y'all.